Welcome to American Patriot with Paul Bear III, broadcasted worldwide and in the great US of A.
I keep a close watch on this heart of mine. I keep my eyes wide open all the time. I keep the ends out for the tie that binds. Because you're mine, I walk the line.
Welcome to another episode of American Patriot with Paul Bear III. I am the People's Lobbyist. And we kick off our podcast today talking about Democrat Party and blackface. What the heck is going on in the state of Virginia? So if you haven't been following this story, there was a yearbook picture from the governor of the state of Virginia that showed him in blackface standing next to a guy with apparently a Ku Klux Klan outfit on. And they put this picture in the medical yearbook for the current Virginia governor. Now, I'm sort of laughing because he first stated that it was me, I'm sorry, I apologize. Then the next day it was like, well, it's not me, and prove that it's me. And I'm just going to tell you, I don't have to go all the way as far as the Ku Klux Klan outfit. That's like if my college put me a picture of me in a dress and my face was covered, I believe that I would be complaining 35 years ago when they did it. So for him to say he didn't notice that, there's a guy in a Ku Klux Klan outfit on his yearbook picture, which I am very glad that my daughter doesn't attend that medical school, by the way. It just sounds ridiculous. And I'm going to get into the blackface controversy a little bit later in the segment. Before we get there, I think I need to talk about a little bit of foundation regarding race in America and what's permitted, what's allowed, what should happen, what's unlawful, what's lawful. So first, I want to talk about the term prejudice. And I want you to follow me through this point because it's not a simple thing to talk about. Unfortunately, in the United States of America, being prejudiced is legal, lawful, and constitutional. Give you some ideas of basic prejudices. I only date tall guys. I only date guys with money. I only date girls with blonde hair. I only date girls with a college degree. We all have prejudices in ourselves. Some are more mainstream and normal. Some are horrid. But in the United States of America, you have the inherited right to be prejudiced. Unfortunately, that applies to race also. Now, me personally, I think it's a sick, inbred, stupid, unconscionable behavior to be prejudiced against a person because of one's race. But the Constitution gives the people the freedom of free association. Because of that, unfortunately, being prejudiced is lawful under the Constitution of the United States. Now, let's talk about racism. Racism is when you take a prejudice based upon race and try to inhibit the life, liberty, or otherwise enjoyment of our society. And that is unconstitutional. So, to give you the real world perspective, you can decide who you want to date. You can decide who you want to come to your house. You can decide who you want to associate with because of race. Again, I think it's completely stupid, but you're allowed to do that. But what you cannot do is take that prejudice and influence the life, liberty, or otherwise enjoyment of our society upon others. So, no, you cannot own a hotel and be open to the general public and all of a sudden say, well, I don't like this black guy because he's black and I'm not going to allow him to stay at my establishment or come into my restaurant or work for my public company. So as long as you want to be prejudiced and stay in this little circle of doo-doo is what I call it, you're allowed to do so. And I will not actively defend your right to do so. I hope you slip and fall I hope you make all the mistakes in the world. That's one time where, I don't care where lamestream media attacks somebody, and if it's true that they're utilizing their prejudice to be racist or just being outright prejudiced. I hate it. But it's the mark of a free society to be able to choose who you associate with. But again, you cannot deny somebody an educational opportunity in this country under our United States Constitution, or the ability to purchase a home in the community, or to arrest or detain people based upon their race and nothing else. I am very fortunate in the position I'm in to communicate with the community on these issues. It's very complicated to talk about race and where we need to go and what needs to be done. Most of us don't want to stick our foot in our mouth, and that's why we stay away from it. But we do have racial issues in this country. The interesting thing about what's going on in Virginia is that, and sort of get back to the blackface, so you have the governor with this blackface controversy. The lieutenant governor now has a sexual assault controversy, which I looked into it, and it's a straight up he said, she said. And those people that follow me, they know how I feel about those. I don't think that anybody should be able to say anything they want without any type of proof, and all of a sudden you're removed from your office or your job or your employment. But victims need to be listened to also. But part of being a victim is being an accuser. And when you're an accuser, that comes with a different set of responsibilities. And I think we have to acknowledge that. Now the Attorney General of the state of Virginia now has come out and said, oh gosh, I forgot I did blackface also. And yeah, there's pictures of me in blackface. So now the Democrats are up against the wall. And you want to know why? Because if the governor resigns, and the lieutenant governor resigns, and the attorney general resigns, you know who becomes governor of the state of Virginia? The House of Representatives Speaker, who is a Republican, all of a sudden is now the governor. So the Democrats were screaming and howling, and the governor needs to resign. That was a week ago. Now the Democrats are starting to get quiet because the political expectancy of having a Democrat as the governor of Virginia seems more important than standing by the principles that they were discussing a week ago, stating that the guy needed to resign. Very interesting judo that has occurred in Virginia, and the nation is watching because we have a presidential election. And the idea of the Democrat Party is we're the party of the black people, and we're the party that represents African Americans, and we stand up against racism, and we will scourge and scorch any person that violates our position on defending African Americans. And the issue in Virginia shows that it's all FUBAR. Military term. If you don't know it, ask your military friends. So I'm laughing, and it's almost hysterical to me as a political. Now, it's not really funny per se, but when you see things that I see, you get a little bit of a sick sense of humor. And it's a little bit funny watching the Democrats on the East Coast squirm because they realize that if they do exactly what they said they were going to do, a Republican is going to be in charge of the state of Virginia. So getting to the blackface issue, those of you that follow me know that I am African American. And growing up, and there were, when I was real young, some of those, I guess, shows and things along those lines, they're really old. They would come on TV. And my mother explained to me that the blackface was utilized, by comics to insult African Americans. So it's a struggle because I'm a free speech First Amendment guy. I'm a guy that believes in the fact that you should have a right to say what you want to say as long as you're not lying on somebody else. When it comes to sick humor, should it be banned? I struggle with this. Now, from a personal perspective, people that participate in blackface and all this stuff, if you haven't changed who you are since then obviously, personally, I don't want anything to do with you. But we're talking more policy and, more importantly, removing government officials for being involved in that. And for myself, I think that the Virginia governor issue is a no-brainer for me because the governor wouldn't admit to what he had done. Now, had the guy came out and said, look, I did this, it was a prank, people were doing this at this time, I was a young man, I didn't understand the significance of what I was doing, it wasn't as clear, maybe that would work. And in some cases, with some people, I think it would be appropriate to allow the person to move on. But you know the problem with Governor Northam? He's standing next to a guy in a Ku Klux Klan outfit. So this wasn't like putting blackface on because you want to be Michael Jackson at your Halloween party. You're standing next to a guy in a Ku Klux Klan outfit. I'm sorry, the governor has to go. That's the difference. That's the difference between dark humor and racist behavior. Because there's nobody that questions that the Ku Klux Klan had no interest whatsoever in fair, equal rights for African Americans, and they believed that we were lesser people. And I don't have to go through all their ideology because everybody that's listening to this knows that the Ku Klux Klan is not interested in Paul Berry III being the speaker at their pig roast. So it's an easier fix for me. The guy admitted that it was him. Then he turned around and said that it wasn't him. He wants to be believed. Well, walk into a police station, tell the desk sergeant that you committed murder, and then the next day say that it wasn't you. Don't be pissed off when your job lets you go. I am more than tickled at the fact that the Democrats are now being forced to deal with the fact that I've always stated and they've denied is that they're racist in all parts of America. And there's people with prejudice in all parts of America. And it's not just, they always say, well, Donald Trump and his supporters are a bunch of racists. Well, I will tell you this. As a political candidate in St. Louis County, before Donald Trump decided and announced he was going to run for president, before the vast majority of the Republican Party got behind Donald Trump and they were looking for Jeb Bush to win or Ted Cruz to win and things along those lines, the people in my region that are Trump supporters, by and large, are my biggest political supporters when I run in elections. So for me, it's always been a struggle because I turn on the news like everybody else. Oh, look at all these Trump supporters. They hate black people. Well, why the heck do they support me? Because I'm not just a little bit black, okay? I'm what you call an authentic black man. Now, there's some Republicans in this universe that are black that they get out there in the media or they do what they do simply because it's their niche. Me, myself, if anybody that knows me knows, I will go after a Republican as fast as I'll go after a Democrat if I think that they're wrong. It's not about spouting the line that you hear on every station of, this is what we believe in, this is who we are. And I believe that there's not everything any person does right all the time. I don't believe that anybody's right all the time, anytime. So it's interesting for America to be able to see that just because you're a Democrat doesn't mean that you would risk having a Democrat in office to deal with a guy with apparent racial animus. if nothing else, maybe just, I guess in best case scenario, he's just non-committal on the issue. But let's just say this. The man standing next to a man with a Ku Klux Klan outfit on, and it's not just putting a little bit of paint because it's Halloween. Sometimes being guilty by association is enough. In politics, that stands true. Does every person that ever wore blackface incapable of being in government? As much as I like it to be true, to be honest with you, it's not true. There are people that can change. I'm a young man, and if you asked me 15 years ago how I felt about gay people, it's a complete different vision than I have now. Because there's a thing called maturity that happens in life experience and God's will on your heart, not to judge man, allow him to judge man, not myself. It's not for me to judge if Tom and Tim want to get married. There are issues that we'll get into different part of this episode where we sort of revisit the marriage abilities of gay people in this country. But I think we all can grow and be better. Why Governor Northam doesn't deserve that opportunity? Because he wouldn't own it. American Patriot with Paul Berry III. We'll be back after this commercial break. Welcome back to American Patriot with Paul Berry III. I am the People's Lobbyist. And for our POTUS Watch this week on American Patriot, we zoom in on the State of the Union address given by our President, Donald J. Trump. Now, CBS, which is sort of tied in with CNN, actually said that over 70% of the public thought that the president did a good job with his State of the Union address, which is almost double the president's approval ratings on the same stations, media outlets. So I thought the speech was good. I thought that he laid out his priorities. I think it was actually well written. I know that there were some reports that the president, before he gave the speech, didn't think it was strong enough. I think that he did a really good job for what that speech requires. He laid out priorities. He laid out the reasons. He laid out things that we're trying to do. The lamestream media is saying that the president didn't tell the truth about one single thing. But I think the public, and especially some of my Democrat friends, are starting to see the president in a different light. Now, your hardcore Trump haters, they're not going to change no matter what he says, okay? He could deliver gold bullion to their house, okay? And they're still not going to like the president. But that's sort of the opposite polar when Obama was president, that there are some people, there are things that as Republicans we would actually champion, like things he was talking about in Afghanistan and some of the, things that we're working on, and they'll never, ever agree. So elections are not really decided by those people because they can't be moved. And people in politics know that. Elections are decided by independents and soft Democrats and soft Republicans. And I thought that the president's speech directed at those voters and or those citizens, I thought that it was pretty effective. But I think that most independents are waiting to see if Congress and the president can work together to push through some of the agenda that he talked about in the State of the Union. So a couple things that I thought that really hit home. First one was criminal justice reform. This is something that has been taboo for politicians since the beginning of time because it makes you sound like that you don't support law enforcement. And the benefit of things that have happened, like in my hometown of St. Louis County, Ferguson issues, is that people are starting to understand that the system's broken. And it doesn't make you anti-law enforcement to be pro-criminal justice reform. Because when I have a lot of cop friends, I run a bail bondsman company and I've owned it for years. And there's a lot of cops I talk to that want this same reform. They don't want to do things stupidly. We are all, as a country, getting on this agenda that we want murderers, rapists, narco traffickers, and full-time scam artists in jail. That's what we want. And everybody else, all these other little petty crimes and, this guy did this jaywalking. We don't want to use incarceration resources in a stupid matter, because every time we do that, then a real dangerous guy is not locked up. And I thought the president came across very strong. And, Kim Kardashian, you get a little bit of credit for this, and I need to get her on this show because she's doing some cool things too. But she went to the president about this issue regarding a woman, nonviolent, got arrested for her first drug case, and got life in prison. If you are the most anti-drug person in the world and you're a fiscal conservative, you still don't want to do this, because I don't want to pay $76,000 a year for this woman to be in a penitentiary. You get me a bad guy, you get me a child molester, you get me a rapist, you get me a murderer, okay? You get me one of them, I have no problem, tax dollar-wise, funding their incarceration. But we've become a nation that creates debtors' prisons. And basically it says, well, if you can't afford this $250 traffic ticket, we'll just hold you in jail until hell freezes over. Even if you are pro-cop, pro-law enforcement, pro-everything when it comes to our criminal justice system, you don't want to waste resources on people that are just not a danger. So I thought the president did an excellent job on that. He also discussed infrastructure of this country. And I think it's something that we need. We need to be doing it. Believe it or not, Russia is actually doing it with all their rhetoric and their sanctions they got going on. They're actually working on the middle class. And I believe that this is something the United States needs to do. Not want to do, need to do. We need to get our infrastructure in order. We need to get our highways in order. We need to have high-speed trains in this country. And while as a guy that doesn't believe that government should be involved in every private project, I will double down on Donald J. Trump's plan if it's tax responsible and it gets the job done without all the fraud. So if that's the case, I'm on board. And I think that our Democrat House of Representatives right now with Nancy Pelosi, I'd like to see Nancy decline a bill like that and the political repercussions if she plays politics with this, because America by and far wants infrastructure done. It's one of the reasons why we have a government. And I say this often. The reason why we have a government is to do for us as a collective what would be either impractical or impossible to do alone. So I'll give you an example. We have a military because, look, every one of us could go buy a gun and stand at the border or the coast and try to defend our country, but we wouldn't be very effective. We wouldn't be trained right. We wouldn't have the best equipment. We'd have no type of ability to work together because we're all going out there with our rifles. So there's a reason why we have a military. There's a reason why government gets involved in streets and construction of highways and byways. Because I could buy the concrete in front of my house and my neighbor buy the concrete in front of his house, but we wouldn't have a conducive road system by doing such. So even as a fiscal conservative, I do acknowledge that there's things that the government should be involved in the matter of planning. Now, I do like to see corporations, private companies that can bid and keep the costs low to do the work, but the government has to be involved in that process. In infrastructure, I'd love to see Nancy Pelosi turn down an infrastructure bill and see what the unions do to her. So that's something that I think that we could really, really work on. So criminal justice, checkbox. I think it's bipartisan. Infrastructure, checkbox. I think it's really bipartisan. Trade. Now, I'm going to tell you, as a lifetime politico, and I do not, and I just want to make sure I think about this. Yeah, I think I'm pretty correct on this. I have not heard one Democrat that's either running for president or considering running for president that has any type of trade platform that they put out in the universe, at least that I could see. And the Republicans, this is sort of something that we own, and that the Democrats are following our leadership on this. Now, I'm going to tell you again, and I said this in a previous segment before, I hate tariffs. I absolutely do. But we have a president that understands that the theft of our intellectual property it's hammering our corporations and limiting our markets. And quite frankly, the way I want to see our president go forward with this, and I like his idea when he says we need to have an agreement that says when they do it to us, we're allowed to do it to them. Try going to Beijing and buying a property and opening up a business. See how successful you are as an American, or go to my great country, Qatar, and try to open up a business. And what they're going to tell you is that you're allowed to be a minority partner, but you have to find a local corporation company within the country that's going to be a majority holder of said company. That's not the way it works. Asians in China can go to New York, San Francisco, Chicago, St. Louis, and they can buy property freely. They can be landlords. They can put businesses in there without all these restrictions. So if you want to utilize our economy for the economic benefits of freedom, which is what we support here in our United States, you make sure, Donald J. Trump, that I can do that in China. You make sure I can do that in Qatar or Saudi Arabia or any of our other friendly countries that we're doing business with. Make sure I have the same rights as an American businessman that they have when they come here. We spend a lot of time talking about the border. I'm more concerned about intellectual property being stolen by these countries, and there's no repercussions on their actions, or my ability as an American businessman to go to other countries and invest my money and diversify, my portfolio the same way that Chinese people do here in the United States. I'm sick of it. Now, if you talk about America first, that sounds American first to me. So trade is something we definitely need to deal with. I don't consider it as bipartisan as I do the other two, but I believe it's something that the House will end up getting behind with Nancy Pelosi, because there are corporate people that run our biggest corporations that have influence in both parties that are going to support what I see as the president's vision on this issue. Now, a lot of attention has been given to some of these fresh, I don't want to publicize them by name, but a lot of information has come across as far as what this new Democrat congressionals, the freshmen, are looking to do, like this green plan and things like that. Our good friend Sean Hannity, he brought this issue up on his show, and as it's a threat to America. And I'm just going to be honest with you, I don't see the threat. And I think that as conservative talk show hosts, I think we're giving more attention to these people than they deserve. And, maybe that's sort of the way, you see it, people click. This is how the companies make money these days. But we're not going to spend a whole lot of time, going back and forth with this one and that one. And they've been in, Congress 3 weeks. America does not want socialism. Let me say it one more time. America does not want socialism. And if you could figure that out by watching the president's State of the Union address, you look at the Democrats, and there's a few over there that, oh, wow, they're talking to me. But most of them, they don't want socialism. And I can see it in their faces. And I believe them when I see them. I don't think the Democrat Party is a complete socialist party, and that's all that they want. I think they have some socialist ideas across the board. But I don't think they're ready for full-blown socialism. I don't think that they're there yet. State of the Union address, Nancy Pelosi in the background. I don't know what she was doing. She just kept on lifting pieces of paper up like she was reading something. What could be going on more important than the President of the United States talking about what he's going to do for the next year? And, you got to love Trump's showmanship. One of the funniest lines during the whole State of the Union was, he had sent a comment that sort of required the Democrats, especially the more left-leaning Democrats, to clap. And he says, well, stand up. I got another one for you. The man, he has true showmanship when he's on the stage. And when he's addressing people, it seems to me that has always been the strongest mark of a president. Barack Obama, hate him, love him, the man knew how to give a speech. George Bush, who didn't have the natural skills as a Trump or Obama as far as giving speeches, or Clinton, understood his base and allowed himself to seem vulnerable time to time so his convictions came through. Leadership isn't about what you can do. Leadership is bringing others around you up to your level to accomplish your goals. Again, I thought that the president did a good job. I did give him the ranking as best. I did give him the ranking as the best State of the Union ever. But I do believe in this climate, he did the best that he could to bring an agenda that can be done. So now it's up to the House and Senate. Are we going to sit back and wait? We have another deadline looming for the government to reopen. I haven't heard anything out of the House or Senate that even remotely talks about whether we're going to meet that deadline. I would like to see our Congress still accomplish things. And I think infrastructure is one. I believe that trade is another that we can really hammer home on. Couple other things that I think that the president talked about. He talked about dealing with the AIDS virus in this country and child cancer. I think those are two things that we can really work on. And I thought the president did a good job of talking about things that there is bipartisan support. But what I'm personally scared of, as your American patriot, is that Nancy Pelosi is going to hear these good ideas and says, you know what? We give them this, Trump might get another 4 years. So it's upon you, the citizen, to watch, to see how honest they are in their negotiations and see how unreasonable they can be with their demands. American Patriot with Paul Beery III. We'll be back after this commercial break.
In New Orleans, they call the rising sun, and it's been the ruin of many a poor boy. And God, I know
Welcome to American Patriot with Paul Berry III. I am the people's lobbyist. And for my American Solutions segment, we study the Shakespearean trilogy, To Plead or Not to Plead, what to do when the FBI comes to your door at 6 a.m. So Roger Stone, longtime Trump advisor, has now been indicted by Robert Mueller's Russia investigative team for 7 different felony offenses. So before I get into this, and this information just came out, I thought it was really important to get this on this segment. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of whether or what the situation is going on with Roger Stone, let's remind ourselves what an indictment is. As the old legal adage says, a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich if he wants to. Bottom line, an indictment does not mean guilty. An indictment does not mean that there's a strong preponderance of evidence. It just means that whatever the prosecutor's saying, if true, may outline that a crime has been committed. So the bottom line when it comes to Roger Stone, and again, before I get to Roger, I want to talk a little bit about Donald Trump Jr. I'm gonna switch streams for a minute because I think it all applies. So we saw our good friend Donald Trump Jr. on Fox News last week. And, I put my hand over my head because I don't understand why Donald Trump Jr. would take the risk of doing any interview, even in the safe confines of Fox News, for PR purposes. I understand that they're talking bad about Donald J. Trump. I understand that they're talking bad about Donald Trump Jr. But when the feds are swimming around like sharks, is not the time to put your toe in the ocean water. Because you might not just lose your toe, you might lose everything. Some will say to me, well, Paul, Donald Trump Jr. says that he's innocent of any of these statements, and he's only trying to defend his good name. And I'll give you the opinion of a great comedian, Chris Rock. And I think he said it best when discussing O.J. Simpson and O.J. possibly hiring Johnny Cochran. Which would you rather have? Would you rather look innocent in jail or guilty at the mall? You rather look guilty at the mall. Regardless of how you look, the outcome is what matters in this situation. So I would like to see Donald Trump Jr. and anybody in the Trump family and anybody that's involved in what the federal government's doing here to start pleading the fifth. And it doesn't mean that you're guilty. From a PR perspective, pleading the fifth makes you look guilty. I agree. But you're not dealing in the realm of public relations. First of all, we have a lamestream in a mainstream media that makes this decision that they're going to tell us the story they want to tell us no matter what the facts are. So going down that route of trying to convince people, you're not going to get to the end of it and they say, oh, gee, did you see Donald Trump Jr. on Fox News? I watched him and I'm a liberal and I hate Republicans, but I believe Donald Trump Jr. Never will those words be stated. So what's the point of exposing yourself to the special prosecutor who will take everything that they got going and try to build a case of any word that you say? When you look at Roger Stone, so to give you the spill, 30 agents, federal agents, showed up at his house to execute a search warrant and to take him to jail in Florida. I find it ironic, by the way, as a side note, that CNN found a way to capture the whole gosh darn thing on tape. I thought this was a secret investigation. I thought that the safety of not only Mr. Stone, but agents conducting a pre-dawn raid would require everybody to be safe and not to let that information get out there. Now, I operate a bail bondsman company. I deal with low-level drug traffickers, and this is the way that it's done. You don't let the information get out. So Roger Stone was arrested. It looks like it was almost a book and release. He posted $250,000 bail, and he has some travel restrictions, but he's out and he's going to court. So with Mr. Stone, I know that he's a longtime supporter of Donald Trump's, and he stated on several times that he's not going to testify, not never, ever, ever, ever against the president. So he says today. But the issue that I have is, how do you get into the position of committing a crime when the underlying crime can't be proved by Robert Mueller? Again, I thought we were going after Russians. Again, I thought this was Rocky IV. They come, they beat up Apollo Creed, he dies, we're all upset, America gets on a plane, we send Rocky over there to Russia, he beats up the Russian, the black trainer lifts him up in the air, and he lifts the American flag in the air. I thought that's what this was about. But when I read this indictment, what I do see is a whole bunch of charges that are based upon things that, what it's based on is a bunch of things that Roger Stone allegedly said. So we have to get out of this idea that we're going to keep this PR matrix. It's okay to tell the FBI, hey, I'm not discussing anything with you. Does it mean that you're guilty? No. Does it mean you're being uncooperative? What I'm saying is really simple. I don't trust the process. I don't like how this is happening. I'm not going to add to the process. I don't know where you're going with this because you haven't explained it to me. Until I understand what you're actually looking for, then I'm not talking. I plead the fifth. Had Roger Stone pled the fifth, you know what we'd be doing right now? Talking about something else. I understand Roger Stone's loyalty to the president. I understand that he just doesn't like his name being disparaged, just like Donald Trump Jr. I don't think Donald Trump Jr. Did the interview to try to, do something other than to protect his name. But quit playing this game. You guys are playing football. They're playing bocce ball. That's what we got going on here. Looking at this indictment, 5 of the charges are statements that allegedly were incorrect to our United States House of Representatives. Who knows if that's going to pan out long term? I don't know. I don't have the evidence in front of me in the same way the prosecutors do. I did read the charging documents. And what I can tell you is that there's absolutely no link to Russia whatsoever. And at worst, it looks like if what the prosecuting attorney is saying is true, Roger Stone colluded with WikiLeaks. Now, if we're going to lock up Roger Stone for colluding with WikiLeaks, how many liberal politicians and political organizations collude with mainstream media? As a former Republican candidate, I can tell you, they got them in the bag better than the consultants that I pay. The directions that they will take from the left. So to answer the question, to plead or not to plead, you should plead the fifth in situations like this. Had Roger Stone pled the fifth, he would not have 7 charges right now. Had he required that all communication be conducted with his attorney, it's not going to get you a better deal with these people. They're out for blood. This is going to make a few of my listeners mad. I like Robert Mueller. I think he's a good man. I think that he's going into this and doing what he's learned to do as a prosecutor his entire life. But it's the motivation of why the investigation is there in the first place. American Patriot with Paul Berry III. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Pleased to meet you. Hope you guess my name. But what's puzzling you is the nature of my game. Stuck around St. Petersburg when I saw it was a time for a change. Killed the Tsar and his ministers. Anastasia screamed in vain. I rode a tank, held a generous rank when the blitzkrieg raged and the bodies stank. Pleased to meet you. Hope you guess my name. Oh, yeah.
Welcome back to American Patriot with Paul Berry III. I am the People's Lobbyist. For my political matrix segment, I want to discuss a little bit about trade wars in China. So the bottom line is that China is an emerging economy. 1/5 of the population lives within their borders, and they are definitely our economic challenge going on in the next decade, maybe even the century. A lot of people have a lot of thoughts about Russia, and they think about the old Soviet Union, but people don't understand. And I don't often quote President Obama, but he was absolutely right when he said this, that Russia is a regional power. Their GDP compared to the United States is 7%. So California and Russia are doing about the same amount of business. The competition when it comes to trade, economic development, making sure we are a first world country and not a third world country, all lives and dies with China. One of the issues that our President Donald J. Trump has taken on is the issue of theft of intellectual properties. So what does that mean? Hackers is usually the way that this works, but I guess it could happen from just a basic human element. Steal our technology, or they buy our devices and they do what's called reverse engineering, which is to look at the device and work backwards and figure out how we did what we did. And then they just simply built their own. The engine of America has always been our creativity, how we create things. And permitting a company, a person, or a country to steal our technology, use it as their own, create knockoffs of our technology, hurts American businesses. And the engine of economic development and growth in our products, in our services that are technical in nature, without that revenue, then the growth of the next technology is not possible. Do you think Boeing just made a plane one day and that was it? Or did they make a plane, sold that plane, use some of those profits to build the next generation of planes? A lot of people, I'm not a big tariff guy. I understand how tariffs work. The bottom line is that when you have a tariff, the corporations never really pay it. They pass it along in the cost to the consumer. I understand that. But something had to be done. Something had to be done. Or this system of the Microsofts and Apple and all these different companies that are creating this technology, some of it is just basic consumer technology. Some of it is technology that protects us from being taken over. If we don't do something about it now, there's going to be a time where it's too late. Our president is right to push companies to build here. Our president is right to say that maybe we should not just utilize China to build every single product that America creates. How many of these products are we taking to India, who has comparable abilities to be able to create and produce products at a low price that are technical in nature? So one of the things that President Xi understands is that it's bad business to screw with America, because we are the engine that buys their goods. China creates a lot of goods. Quite frankly, the people that live in China can't even afford the goods that they're making. The president doesn't get enough credit on this issue. And I've said this before, do I agree with President Trump on every single thing he does? Oh, absolutely not. There's some things that I want to pull my short hair out just because I just don't think it's a good idea. But with that being said, give the man his credit when it's due. Nobody has brought China accountable on these issues until now. If we decide that we're going to get into a trade war with China, which again, I don't like trade wars, and I also say I don't like tariffs, at least the president has his eye on the end game. Do I agree with every, step here in this? I've been against tariffs for a long time. But with a country like China, there's only a few tools that we have. And let's not forget, we fund our government by debt that's bought by China, which is a totally different issue that we've got to address. We are trillions of dollars in debt. We've got to do something about it, America. And I don't think that Bernie Sanders is going to address China. I don't think that, Elizabeth Warren is going to address China. If it doesn't happen now, if it doesn't happen during the Trump presidency, when is it exactly supposed to happen? Presidents all come with a different background and ideology. The issue and why the government has to get involved in this is because we have our economy is not government centric. China's is. Russia's is. Most major countries develop policies through their countries. Now, when you're talking about a country, you're not talking about, some company. You're talking about an entity that has a military, that can create their own currency, can manipulate their own currency, can pass laws to support their interests. So people that don't understand international trade tell me all the time, well, Paul, I thought we're capitalists. Why is the government even doing anything when it comes to China? Because our international companies that operate internationally are not playing on a level playing field. You don't believe me? You think you can buy property in Beijing the same way you can buy property in Times Square or Chicago or San Francisco? In most of these countries, and even some of our Middle Eastern countries, you can't even do business in the country unless you're a minority partner in your own company. So in other words, if there's not a company of that country that you're partner up with and they have a majority percentage, you can't even create a company there. If you want American protection, if you want American ideals, if you want American tax dollars, if you want anything from America, you need to believe in our values or we need to cut the aid. It's just that simple. Do they have to be American? No. Do they have to agree with everything we do in America? No. Do they have to respect our Constitution? Somewhat. Because if you're not on board with the way that this American patriot sees this country, then you're nothing more than an enemy. American Patriot with Paul Berry III. We'll be back after this commercial break.
And it's whispered that soon, if we all call the tune, then the piper will lead us to reason. And a new day will dawn for those who stand long, and the forests will echo with laughter. Don't be alone there. It's just a sprinkling for the May Queen. Yes, there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on.
Welcome back to American Patriot with Paul Berry III. I am the People's Lobbyist. For my political matrix segment, I want to talk a little bit about life. 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 It's a basic concept that is so important to the people of this great nation and the founders that it was laid out that you shall not take a person's life without due process of the law. So what does that mean? Yes, there are times where your life can be taken by the government, but you must, I'm going to say it one more time, and you must have due process of the courts. When it comes to the life of the unborn, it's interesting how everybody believes that that's not a human, or it's not life, or it's not killing when you have an abortion. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, saw it fit to utilize abortions, and it could be a useful tool, a public policy tool to kill African American population off. But despite this abhorrent history of abortion in this great nation of ours, it's very difficult for a political like myself to get fellow African American politicos to stand up for the rights of the unborn. Why does it matter? Gee, African Americans used to be the second most populous people in this country. Now we're number 3. Is that all because of immigration? No. There's a lot of factors in play there. But the one that we can stop with the signature of a pen is the killing of black babies in urban areas by the form of abortion. So how do we get to this point? Well, you can't afford a baby, you got to kill it. You don't live in the right neighborhood, you got to kill it. You're unmarried, you should kill your baby. You would think that the Ku Klux Klan was funding Planned Parenthood, as many babies that have been killed in this nation. Most of you guys that listen to me know I come from St. Louis, Missouri, where we had the issues of the city of Ferguson and Michael Brown being killed. Whether you believe that the killing was justified, unjustified, in between, don't care, doesn't really matter what your position is on this issue. The one thing I could never understand is that there is outrage when a 19-year-old is killed. But there's no outrage for the innocent babies that are killed prior to birth. Good friends of mine in the Conservative Party are considering heartbeat bills across the country. So what is a heartbeat bill? It basically states once you detect a heartbeat, it's a life. I think we could do a little bit better than that. But, this process of unraveling ourselves from sanctioned murder of babies across this country, especially black babies, I'll take the wins I can get. My Little League baseball coach used to tell me, Paul, you can't hit a home run all the time. Just get on base and then steal bases if necessary. I think that we need to really look at what we're doing here to our population. I see all the Black Lives Matter signs. I want to see a Black Babies Matter sign. Because while there's doubt and there's disagreement regarding whether law enforcement should have, shot Michael Brown in the back and forth, who I know is 100% innocent? Is the baby. I hear all the time with the DACA argument. Well, we got to have DACA because these kids did not have the opportunity to make their own decision and they should not be penalized because of such decision. But it's complete hypocrisy when you're looking at it from the viewpoint that does not apply to the unborn child. If you're a guy like myself, this was an issue that took a long time for me to come out on. Because as a young man, the way that I looked at it was, what decision is it of mine to get involved or have an opinion? This should be decided by the mothers and the women. Not as far as having an abortion, because I've always been pro-life, but taking up the cause and being a voice for it. I always had a feeling of being uncomfortable about diving into things. I didn't even have kids at the time. What the heck do I know about this? But as a father of 5 daughters, my oldest daughter attends University of Southern California. And if you look at the statistics, if you look at the Planned Parenthood playbook, my daughter was unborn, unwed parents. who had a dad that was finding his way as a radio station intern and a mother that was going to college. And it would have been very easy to make the decision that, look, we just don't have the money. We're not set up right. We don't know what our future is going to be. Let's just pay $400, get an abortion, and buy ourselves out of it. Luckily for me, the love of my life, who is a Democrat, by the way, when that decision had to be even discussed, it wasn't discussed because she wouldn't buy into the BS. She wouldn't buy into the sales point that we should just kill our child just because we're not set up yet. And now look at her, attending the University of Southern California in pre-med, and will do things that her father, as a radio host, will never accomplish. I ask people to consider, what is the benefit of killing our future? What would have happened if my daughter was aborted? We would have never known. And the love that I have for my family lets me know that pro-life is the right decision. When she graduated high school, I knew it was right. When she went to science camp, I knew it was right. When she spelled her name the first time, I knew it was right. So you have a group of pastors out here, and I'm seeing some of this in some of the media feeds in the East Coast, that they had a group of pastors show up to bless the abortion clinic. Have people lost their mind? My listeners up in New York State, what the hell is your governor doing? The word abortion rights is an oxymoron statement with emphasis on moron. I'm an unapologetic defender of the unborn in life. I'm colorblind on this issue. Black babies matter. White babies matter. Latino babies matter. I don't care about the color. All babies matter. And this patriot will continue to defend the rights of the unborn. American Patriot with Paul Berry III. We'll be back after this commercial break.